All right. Well, we're missing a ton of people, but at some point I'm just going to start this. 6:59, so I'll give another minute. But that's it. You guys pretty burned out on Zoom calls?
It's not
I'm only
terrible.
asked.
Sometimes it's better than going all over the place in person.
That's true. That is true. Well, it's like we have a bunch of people. I've had this happen a million times. Like you have a ton of people sign up and then like 10% show up and you're like, what is up with that? Like, don't sign up if you're doing. I mean, I know things happen, but to 90% of the people, it's like, no. I don't know. I think it's that fear of missing out. People are like, oh my God, and they have to sign up and then they sign up and then they just blow it off. So it's one of my pet peeves, just so you know. You guys signed up. You guys showed up. So you guys are like, you're totally on my awesome list. Let's see. There's Mary. Of course, the people that are traveling with me, they know they have to show up because they're going to get crap from me when they see me live. So, all right. Well, I'll start soon. So, hi, Mary.
Hey, Anissa, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I heard you had a long walk. I don't know. Recently, I talked to Sue today, and she said you guys went on a long hike.
Yeah, we've done several, so I'm ready.
Awesome. I haven't moved off my desk, so I'll be the one behind.
Now you will. There you will.
Right on. All right. Well, I'm going to get started. There's 9 of us here. We had, I don't even know, several more, but we'll just move forward and people will join as they join. So hopefully everybody is here to talk peptide therapy. Peptides are really interesting because they've been around for decades, but they're just gaining in popularity because we're just beginning to understand the therapeutic value of them, which is basically what we're going to talk about today. Interestingly, JP Morgan has now projected that by 2030, peptides will be the #1 prescribed medication. And I think we're seeing that trajectory already with the GLP-1s, and we're going to talk about a lot of others today and what they can be used for. Just kind of a little housekeeping. Let's make this interactive since it's a pretty small group. So if you have questions, feel free to ask, poke your hand up, or just ask. Also, we're recording this, so in case a friend of yours didn't show up, we will have it in recording. And I am going to move fairly quickly. I tend to move fast just because I think, there's a lot of content to cover and it also gets really dull hearing me talk all the time. So hopefully you will all have questions and we can make this somewhat interactive. Just to move forward quickly, what I'm going to cover are 3 things. One is the overall aging process. And since our male species didn't show up today, we had a couple of them sign up. We may skip the whole focus on the male decline since it's insignificant anyway compared to what we go through in menopause. And then we're going to talk about longevity theories. There are a couple of theories out there. And why that's important is because it completely relates to why peptides are gaining in traction around the idea of longevity, and which ones in particular are good for that. So we'll talk about sort of the middle piece here, which is regenerative medicine, peptide therapy, maybe a little bit about hormones and other supplements. And then lastly, this is not a sell job. I don't do that. But if you are looking for this and you're like, okay, how do I even move forward? We can give you some ideas on how to do that as well. I think you guys all know me here. I don't feel the need to give you a whole background, but I want to tell you why this is relevant or why my background is relevant, just so you kind of understand where this all came from. About 20 years ago, actually, I founded a database, and that database collected all of the nutrition fact panels for all of the products in grocery stores, which is a lot of data. And we then actually put FDA algorithms to run claims over the top of all that data. Why that's relevant is because the next step to doing that was to create a supplement database doing exactly the same thing. So I spent a lot of years in nutrition and supplement data, understanding. Third piece of this is how the FDA functions and how the FDA creates claims and allows claims and all their regulatory environment. So I was fortunate to go to the White House for a consultation, and I actually got to spend some time understanding the FDA. And then out of that, I sort of went into this hibernation period of training and extreme training and travel around the world. And what came out of that was my own personal use of performance supplements. And so that was about 11 years ago. I started using peptides, and one in particular called BPC 157, which is known for tissue repair and regeneration, was the one I started with and became enamored with what it did for me. And that led me to my third startup, which really was centered around menopause. But what we know about menopause now is menopause is actually an accelerated aging period for women. So menopause itself accelerates our aging process by 6%. They can actually put a number on that. Does not happen the same way for men. So that seems fair, right? So worked in the menopause space, trying to understand what can we do now to counteract what happens in this hormone decline phase. And so for the past couple of years, I have been developing this program, which has been lifestyle based. I've brought peptides and other supplements into it, all completely based in science. I've had dietitians, physicians, trainers involved in this. So this is not me, because this is my next claim, which is I am not a doctor. I think you all know that. And so this is only informational today. This is obviously not intended for anybody to take it, run with it, and say, hey, Anissa told me I should be taking this peptide. So not the case. Although I may recommend something, and then we have physicians that we can see to help with that. Just to kind of wrap this up, the last few years I have been working specifically with women in our age range, focused on essentially peptide therapy, lifestyle change. And I've also done some work with longevity clinics, med spas, and fitness chains in this area. So that's kind of wrapping up like how this all got started, and why I even do this in the first place. So hopefully that's, a little bit insightful. Moving along, and a lot of you have probably seen this, but I think it's critical to understand, if you haven't, all of the things that happen in hormone decline with women. Most specifically, starting on the left in those sort of mustard colored boxes, body composition is a big change. What does that mean? That means estrogen is a protein synthesizer. That means estrogen helps us retain and build muscle. Well, why do we care about that? Well, obviously, we all care what we look like to some degree. We want to be able to stand straight, tall. We want to be able to be strong. But more importantly, muscle burns 3 times more calories than fat. I'll say that one more time. Muscle burns 3 times more calories than fat. So you want to retain as much muscle as you can aging-wise, because you want to eat 3 times more calories, right? So that's important, because nobody tells you that when you get into menopause, right? You don't get a guidebook to say, hey, guess what? You gotta keep your muscle mass. So that's why you're starting to see, Instagram, Facebook, everybody's talking about, midlife women need to be doing strength training. Well, yeah, we do. But we also need to eat protein. And if there's a way for us to retain our estrogen, that is also very helpful in retaining muscle mass. So that's important. The box number 2 on weight, the weight happens as a complete output of box number 1, which is you lose your muscle and you don't change the way that you're consuming calories, you will pick up more body fat. And it tends to reside in women around the middle for some reason. And nobody actually knows why. No doctors can actually tell you why in menopause do women only seem to put it on more around their waist, but it is a fact. The third bullet over disease risk is the last one I'm really going to emphasize today, but that is the fact that estrogen is a transport vehicle with insulin to take sugar in your bloodstream and move it into your muscles and cells. So as you lose estrogen, you lose your ability to use carbs the same way. So those carbs sit in your bloodstream. Therefore, the number one time in a woman's life she is most at risk for type 2 diabetes is when she's 45 years old, which is the average age of perimenopause. Amazing how this all works together, right? So these are simple things. It's not rocket science, but nobody tells you that. And so until you learn that and you start adjusting your eating for more protein, for less carbs later in the day, all of these types of things, your body's going to go through some changes. Just to finish out the slide, I like to harp on the exercise capacity one too. A lot of us here are fitness oriented. And that's a big one because, again, exercise capacity just means the way that your body uses oxygen. You lose that capability as well as you go through menopause. And so it's called VO2 max, just the way your body uses oxygen. There are things you can do for that. So I want to highlight that. And then I did say that was the last one, but I'm still going to talk about the far right because that's my favorite piece, which is we lose up to 30% of brain function. So we're gaining weight, losing muscle, can't exercise anymore because we can't breathe, and then we lose the ability to think about it. It's all a really great period of life. But really, it's just, this is aging, right? We all know it. Why it is important, again, those of you who are joining late, these are just a couple of precursor slides on aging in general for women, and then we're going to get into regenerative medicine and peptides. But just understanding this and understanding everything your body's going through, I think will make sense when we start talking about the benefits of certain peptides. So,
Anissa, could
yes.
you, so a couple of people have mentioned about the black mark on or strip on the right side of your screen. Any chance you could try to stop sharing and try sharing again to see if that resolves it? Oh, there it goes.
Or just
Yep.
went.
Okay.
Yep, there it goes. Now it's gone.
Yeah, that's weird. It's just the ability to see people as I'm talking, but so I don't have visibility anymore, but that's okay with me. So just let me know. Tracy, you can let me know if someone asked a question, maybe.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Sorry about that, guys. Hopefully you didn't miss too much. And then there's the one at the top, which I don't think I can get much more rid of than that. Hopefully everybody can see the slides now. I should have asked. My apologies.
Yes, that's better.
Okay. So the real reason that this is all important is our health, right? So focusing on aging, we're thinking about, okay, how do I age better? Well, the output of all of that decline from menopause is that the statistic, and this is a Center for Disease Control statistic, 80% of women over the age of 55 have one of 6 chronic conditions. And those conditions are COPD, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, arthritis, and asthma. And the last two I kind of say are a little bit of catch-alls, but it's still 4 in 5 women over the age of 55. And those are debilitating things. So that's why I think this is going to become more and more of a focal point, this concept of aging better. And not that our parents didn't think about it, but quite honestly, our mothers did not have access to a lot of the information that we're talking about, which is really sad, that they, were sort of left in the blind to figure out what was going on. And obviously they didn't have a lot of tools to actually deal with it, even if they did know. So moving forward, I don't think any of the men joined tonight, so I think I'm going to skip this slide, other than to say, if you have a spouse, you may know, or you'll want to know, that even though they do not go off the proverbial cliff that we do, they do lose their hormones over time, and they do go through a lot of the same types of symptoms. So they will lose, their muscle mass and gain fat. They will lose their libido, possibly have difficulty concentrating, possibly have heightened anxiety, and also deal with low energy and fatigue, which are also symptoms that we deal with in menopause. So, they are going through some of that, just in a different pace than we are typically. So I'm going to take a minute before I dive into regenerative medicine and talk about they call them the 9 hallmarks of anti-aging or of aging. And I think the first thing to say here before we talk about longevity is Right now, there's no regulated definition of the term. And what that means, remember, I came from an FDA background of claims. That means that anybody can put the longevity term on anything. So if you have a walking program, you can call it a longevity program. If you have a stem cell replacement process, you can call it a longevity program. And those are obviously, opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of, the scientific effort it takes to do them. So the good news is that there has been a roundtable created, and they're, the experts in the fields like the David Sinclair from Harvard and Steve Horvath and some of the guys that have been in this business from a scientific standpoint for years. They have come together and they're working on creating a definition. And where it seems to be leveling out is really around the idea of health span. And so I can't see you guys, but if you don't know what health span is and the difference from lifespan, health span is the number of years that you're living disease-free. Lifespan is literally just the number of years you live. Right now in the United States, there's about a 12.5-year gap between health span and lifespan. So that theoretically could mean, you're living, unfortunately, diseased, not feeling well, or in a nursing home, all of those things. So there's about a 12.5-year difference. And sadly, there's actually a 2.5-year greater difference for women. So there's a 15-year gap between lifespan and health span. So where longevity is coming into play is really focusing on how do you improve your health span. And so the leading theories, and again, I'm getting super scientific. You guys were like, we did not sign up for biology class today, Anissa. I do think this is really critically important to understanding the peptides. I promise you we're going to get there in a minute. The really big ones that are kind of rising to the top, and again, we're going to talk about this within the peptide focus, is the first one is mitochondrial dysfunction. So does anybody remember what the mitochondria are in your body? Anybody? You can yell it out. No.
It's important.
It's important. It is. Does anybody remember biology class in 10th grade? No?
I kind of do the graphs, the little charts of things, but.
So the mitochondria they're the center of your cell. They're called the powerhouses. And what they do is they really are good at converting things into energy. So your mitochondria are critically important to keep your body functioning because you need energy to do that. Your circulatory system, your heart rate, your brain, your cognitive skills. So all of that comes really from your mitochondria, the center of your cells. So figuring out how to keep those mitochondria healthy is one of the anti-aging theories. And the thought process is if you can keep your mitochondria healthy and you keep that energy flowing, then everything else will be great. You won't actually age. It's a pretty interesting concept. The second one is telomere attrition. And I know I'm getting way into the weeds here, but let me briefly go through this. Telomeres are the ends of your DNA strands. And the longer they are, the longer your life will be. And the shorter they are, the shorter your life will be. And so keeping those as long as possible is a huge focus. So again, that's another theory is if we can keep those telomeres long, then your longevity will be good. Your health will be good. The third one is cellular senescence. That just strictly means your cells stop dividing. And when they stop dividing, they're not growing, they're not repairing tissues and keeping things healthy. So if you can, again, find a way to stop cellular senescence, cellular death, that's great. And the last one is stem cell exhaustion. And I know this is all it's way, way beyond where probably any of us wanted to go tonight, but stem cell exhaustion, stem cells are they're like, what am I trying to say? They're recurring or they're cells that actually rapidly divide. And so they're really, really gaining in popularity. I hope most of you have heard the term stem cell before. It's had some really big time negative press because for a period of time, there was a thought that stem cells only came from fetuses. So from embryonic fetuses, and that's actually not the case. Now they can actually harvest stem cells from your own body and bank those for you to use at a later period in your life. And stem cells are great because they divide so quickly that they actually repair tissues, injuries, ligaments, tendons, all those things that, you know, go wrong as you age really quickly, and many other things beyond that. But the point is, if you can stop them from declining, and they do decline as we age, then again, you might be able to reduce or delay your aging. So these are kind of the top theories. The only reason I brought this up is because as we go through some of the different peptides, we're going to talk about longevity. We're going to talk about, you know, some of the things that help with energy, and you might hear the word telomere, mitochondria, stem cells, some of those. So I'm going to get off the science bandwagon that we're on here, but I wanted you to kind of get that general sense. Does anybody have any questions to date? Because I went through a lot of that really fast. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. So the next thing, this is kind of the segue of everything we just talked about with aging, moving into regenerative medicine. Well, what is regenerative medicine? It's kind of like it sounds. It's about training your body to repair and regenerate itself. So what's great about that is it's not putting, you know, exogenous things into your body. It's using what's already there. So when we talk about peptides, peptides already exist in your body. You have about 7,000 of them. They have a multitude of different purposes in your life. And what peptide therapy is about sending a signal into that peptide to tell it to, or into that, into your cell actually, to tell it to do something. So I drew this picture. This is really horrific. I did this about 10 minutes ago, but I think it explains kind of how this might work. So peptides, if you want to think about them, they're like a phone line. So they are bringing their signaling device. They're bringing in a message to your cell and telling it what to do. And so the best example that I can give is thinking about human growth hormone in your body. So when you are young, there's something called human growth hormone, or HGH, which actually is what tells your body to grow, to keep replicating, and tells all different types of cells in your body to keep replicating and keep growing. And so today there is use of HGH, human growth hormone, to help us continue to stay youthful, as an example, and to help people, you know, grow bigger muscles, or do a multitude of things. But the point is, with peptides, what a peptide does, I'm going to explain why a peptide is different than a pharmaceutical. Peptides come in and they signal that hormone, that growth hormone, to release more. So all the peptide is doing is coming in and saying, hey, send out more of that growth hormone. We need more of it. It's not bringing in growth hormone. That's the difference between a pharmaceutical, where you are putting growth hormone into your body. With a peptide, you're sending a signaling device into your existing hormone and saying, okay, let's emit more of this into the body. So that's sort of one way to think about peptides versus pharmaceutical drugs. The benefit to that is, with a peptide, you actually can't really overdose, because your body has a threshold in it for having too much. And so you can send the peptide in, and the peptide's going to say, hey, send more, because we need, you know, this amount in this muscle that's lifting this heavy weight, and we want to grow that muscle and make it bigger. It's sending that message, but it will not overdose you on too much hormone. Whereas with an exogenous, not an endogenous, internal, with an exogenous thing where you're sending in, you know, pharmaceutical human growth hormone, you certainly could put too much in and overdose on that. So I know that's complicated, but just as an overview, that's how peptides work. They're already in your body, and they send signals to parts of your body, to different hormones, to potentially shut down your ghrelin hormone, which is your appetite hormone, telling you you're hungry. And so actually I'm going to kind of move forward, because I think we're getting into more of the details of specific peptides and what they do. So common peptide uses, if you kind of look around the circle, there's a million more than this, because there's a lot of them for very specific medical scientific purposes. But some of the ones that we're probably more interested are in metabolic health, so weight reduction, energy management, how do I get more energy, cognitive enhancement. How can I focus more, be more creative, reduce my anxiety? Injury repair. If you tear a muscle fiber, how do you repair that faster? Sexual well-being. We sometimes lose libido as we age. Longevity, overall well-being there, body composition, and skin health. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those different areas. Before I do, I want to talk about why peptides, excuse me, have hit the radar screen recently. And I think I'll ask first, and I can't see you guys, maybe I'll flip this up for a sec. How many of you guys have heard about GLP-1s? Has everybody heard? Pretty much, okay, a couple people haven't.
Yep.
Okay, well, GLP-1, I bet you if I say the name Ozempic, you heard Ozempic? Okay, well, if you haven't, GLP-1s or Ozempic are peptides. So the peptide name is called semaglutide. What semaglutide is known for is actually shutting down appetite hormones in your brain and also slowing gastric emptying out of your stomach so that you feel full and you're not having cravings. And so people are dropping a lot of weight on this peptide. It's called Ozempic by brand name, but the active ingredient, the peptide, is called semaglutide. And what's interesting is the American Medical Association this year highlighted the fact that for the first time in a decade, we're seeing a decline in the obesity rates. And they're attributing it heavily to the GLP-1 use. So we all may be sitting here thinking, good or bad, no judging, right? But there's that moment you say, oh, it's the magic pill and it's not going to last forever. Well, the one thing to note about this is it's not just women losing weight, but I personally have worked with several women who've lost 30, 40 pounds. People have dropped 70, 80 points in their cholesterol levels. People have dropped their blood sugar back to normal range. People have blood pressure go down to normal ranges. So where I'm going with this, if you remember at the beginning of our conversation tonight, I talked about the chronic illness focus and how women our age are unfortunately, besieged with these chronic diseases going forward. This is one way I think we're starting to see an opportunity to reduce that and to live longer, have a better health span, and feel better. So I just wanted to point that out, that this has been a real positive as far as the American Medical Association is concerned. And we can talk a lot more about GLP-1s, but what they're saying is they're not finding a lot of negativity to these. They're mostly seeing benefits to heart health going forward, and obviously the weight loss and also anti-inflammation. The one downside is potential loss of muscle mass. So I'm moving forward, and let me shut this back down so you guys can see the slide, not me. So the one we were talking about is called semaglutide. It is a GLP-1, and that just simply means it's affecting the GLP hormone in your body. And it does the things that we just talked about, which is suppressing and igniting the ghrelin and leptin hormones, which help with your appetite control. It does reduce inflammation. So there is a little bit of, relief in terms of joint pain and pressure you feel in your body. It slows your stomach from emptying. It slows the movement of food through your stomach, so you don't feel hungry. So it's got a lot of these fabulous benefits, and I sound like I'm selling it. I'm not. It's not right for everybody, but it does work. And I have seen a lot of people really be pleased with the results coming out of it. So that is one peptide. There's another one called tirzepatide. Tirzepatide has brand names as well, like Zepbound. So if you've seen Zepbound on TV, it's nothing more than tirzepatide, which is the active ingredient. The difference between semaglutide and tirzepatide, because both do exactly the same thing, they work on the GLP-1 hormone. Tirzepatide has one extra component that works on another hormone that does the exact same thing, suppresses appetite and helps with blood sugar management and all of these things that we've talked about, gastric emptying. It just adds one extra sort of double dose, I'll call it. So tirzepatide is known to be slightly more effective than semaglutide, but both really do the same thing. So I raise these both as in terms of metabolic health. When you're thinking about, okay, I cannot get this belly fat off. I cannot get this 30 pounds off I put on 30 years ago with my kids. These are very, very effective. I've seen about a 95% success rate with the people who've used them. So I say that because, again, I know the frustration of the weight gain situation. And if you feel like you've tried everything and you just haven't been able to move the needle, you know, it's partly because of what I showed on the first slide of all the things that happen with the loss of estrogen. So it is an option to think about. And these are just pictures of people who've kind of been through and lost 30, 40 pounds and been very happy. And we're going to stay on the topic of body composition and talk about lean muscle mass. And the peptide that's known for that is called tesamorelin. And what that does is, if you remember us talking about growth hormone earlier, it actually helps to increase growth hormone in your body. So it works on your pituitary gland, and it's basically emitting that growth hormone. And so the growth hormone, if you guys have read anything about it in your past, there's, again, a lot of negatives and a lot of positives out there. And some of it is because there has not been a lot of human research on peptides. And that is one of the biggest problems right now, is most of the research has been done on animals, which doesn't give you an apples to apples comparison with humans. The other thing is there's a lot of anecdotal information. So a lot of physicians that have been using peptides for years and years and years have phenomenal stories, but it's not, you know, a clinical study. And so there's this big fight sort of going on, if you follow this at all, between what's going on in the FDA with RFK taking over, who is pretty supportive of, we'll call them alternative, you know, methods of medication. So he's pretty supportive. And then you've got the, you know, sort of the more traditional doctors who are not schooled and don't have a history maybe with peptides. And it's sort of this kind of ongoing fight. But the GLP-1s we just talked about, semaglutide and tirzepatide, are kind of bringing this to the forefront, because we're now seeing what they can actually do for our bodies. And there's many, many more peptides, as I mentioned, that also have phenomenal results. So one is tesamorelin, and it is a growth hormone, or it stimulates growth hormone. It is not a growth hormone. It is a growth hormone secretagogue, they call it, which is secreting growth hormone. And growth hormone in general is really, essentially, they call it the fountain of youth for a reason. It does help your body burn fat more efficiently, gain muscle more easily. It helps with skin and your circulatory system, and, you know, basically growing your hair better. I mean, it really is kind of that magic pill. However, I will say that the risk with tesamorelin or any secretagogue that deals with your human growth hormone is, and this is the way I would phrase it, and probably anybody else would in this field, if there is a mutation in your cells or a dysfunction in your cells, it will also expedite that. And so I know the term then cancer comes to mind, which is true. So if you had a mutation in your cells and you took human growth hormone, it could potentially expedite that. So there is a risk with it. I would never, ever tell you there's not with this one in particular. However, there are a lot of people, certainly bodybuilders, you know, people who feel willing to take that risk, and a lot of people use it, and it's got phenomenal results. The woman on the right hand side is, you know, an older woman who, not older, but she's, you know, 40s, 50s, who had been on it and, you know, lost a significant amount of weight, just started streamlining her body. There's multitudes of stories out there with it. So it's just one that kind of goes in the arsenal for lean muscle mass. Other ones that are sort of in the same camp are CJC 1295 and ipamorelin. Those are two different hormone secretagogues, and then MOTS-c on the other side. All three of these have to do with body composition. And I can speak personally to the CJC 1295. It is one I did try about, I don't know, 5 years ago. I tested that out. And basically what it does is it triggers I won't get into details, but it triggers a release that helps to build muscle mass. And so just so you know this, as a female, you would never, ever be able to build like an inordinate amount of muscle unless you really were taking sort of an external growth hormone. We just don't have the testosterone to support that level of muscle mass in our bodies. So all it will do for you is help define and develop what you kind of already have there. And, you know, give you some strength and power, make you feel a little bit better in that regard, but it isn't going to make you into this, you know, sort of Hulk. So just thinking about, you know, CJC 1295, ipamorelin, many women try these. They're really, what they do is they help stimulate a 3 to 5 time increase in growth hormone. And so again, back to all the sort of youthful effects that has. And then on the other side, MOTS-C it's a mitochondrial peptide. So remember when we talked about the powerhouse of the cell and impacting energy production, it is good for that. And it has been known, and those of you who are athletes on the call, it has been known to help with exercise endurance. So it is one that I would say is not necessarily approved by the World Anti-Doping Association. A lot of this stuff is not testable at this point, but it also isn't something I'd say, hey, you know, go take this stuff, improve your speed, and then, don't tell anybody about it. It's probably not the most ethical thing to do. But they did do studies, and again, it was on animals, but what they found is they took sort of 3 different sets of animals in age, so very young, sort of middle-aged and older, and they found that the older animals were actually able to develop speed to be faster than the sort of midlife animals. So it was really interesting. It also helped with lifespan. So MOTS-C is one that is super hot on the list of peptides that people are looking at, doctors are looking at for improving lifespan, improving just overall fitness levels as we age. So those are kind of the big ones for body composition, the CJC 1295, ipamorelin, the MOTS-C, and then also the tesamorelin we talked about. Definitely stop me, and I know I'm in the weeds. If I'm too far in the weeds, let me know. I can try to pull up a little bit. Let's talk about mitochondria. Yes, mitochondria, but longevity for a minute. So again, going back to how to improve the health span years and, you know, basically live disease free. There are a couple of peptides that are on the radar screen, and I bet you've heard of this one, NAD+. And if I could see you guys, I'd ask you to raise your hands, but NAD+ is getting a lot of press, especially if you live in a larger city and you have access to, some of the drip bars, the, IV injections, those kinds of things. NAD is a very popular injectable. And the reason for that, NAD is a coenzyme, and it's basically the second most in volume or most in quantity molecule that you have in your body. And it is critical for almost every metabolic process. And so in terms of, again, keeping that energy level up, and energy is good because it helps you repair tissues. It helps you keep your, heart rate beating in a stable mode. It helps you with, skin regeneration and, basically repair of everything. It is one of those things that we lose over time. And so as we're aging, we're losing the NAD. And so to be able to supplement with that is one of the things that longevity doctors are noting as one of the top things to do for longevity. So there's ways that you can do this, and you can certainly go in and have like an injection of NAD+. But the other option is actually to take the building blocks of it. And we'll talk about those a little bit later when I get into supplements, because some of the more recent research is finding that the things that make up NAD are actually more effective or more bioavailable for you than actually taking the NAD itself. But just note in your mind, NAD+ is something that you want to make sure you're keeping in your body as best you can. It's already in there. You just you want to maintain that level. And you're thinking, well, how do I know that? There are tests, and this stuff is all going to come probably in the next 5 years, but there are diagnostic tests. So you can actually look at what your baseline level of NAD plus is today and watch what happens over the next couple of years. So again, all stuff kind of on the fringe, but good to be kind of keeping in the back of your mind, because these are very core pieces of longevity and better aging. The next one in the middle is something called SS31. And actually, this is one I have actually personally been on for the past 2 years. It is an injectable, and what it does is it kind of goes in and cleans out the dead wood in your mitochondria. So it's known for kind of freeing up energy so that that energy can be used other areas of your body that you need it to keep it healthy. So again, it's kind of like I said, cleaning up and getting rid of the dead wood so that it's your cells are just left with the healthy mitochondria and not the ones that are dysfunctional. So that is one, you can go read up on it. It's very fascinating, but that's an injectable that you would do a couple of times a week. And I know I keep saying injectable, but I can explain that later, but it basically just means you're kind of injecting it into yourself a couple of times a week, which I know sounds a little bit hardcore, but the reason for that is most of this, as you will read and learn about this, unfortunately, this can't be taken. They can be taken orally as a capsule, but they will lose their bioavailability or their effectiveness in your body, because most drugs, as they go through your stomach, unfortunately are, somewhat debilitated by the gastric juices. And so by putting it directly into your bloodstream, you are going to have much more effectiveness from it. So SS31 is sort of in the middle there with mitochondria, and then epitalon on the right-hand side. What they're seeing with that is they believe it is able to extend your telomeres. So if you remember, those are on the ends of your DNA, and they are actually what can help determine your longevity. So if you can keep those telomeres extended, you will stay healthy longer. So that's another one on the radar screen. This is one that you would cycle just a couple of times a year. And so I'm not going to get right now into it, but I know probably going through your mind already is, okay, well, how would I know where to even start with this stuff? What's the best thing to do? This might feel extremely overwhelming, because it does to me, and I'm presenting it, thinking to myself, this is a lot of information. The first step, and we'll talk about this at the end, is really figuring out what your objectives are, and then letting a doctor help you with that. So it's either, getting some diagnostic tests to see where you are today, and then working with a doctor to put a plan in place, or even just trying a few things on your own, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. This is a lot of information. And honestly, if you guys walk away and you at least remember a couple of the names of the ones that struck you, like, hey, I am worried about, my overall longevity, and, this mitochondrial thing makes sense. And maybe you go dig around a little bit, or you ask somebody, friends of yours who are super hot on these topics, you might hear, yeah, mitochondrial health is a big deal. It's trending as one of the top, reasons to focus on to delay aging. You might start to see a little bit more of this stuff in the media, because it is starting to be a little bit more mainstream, even though it feels kind of super sciencey. I'm going to move on. And again, please stop me if any of this, don't be afraid to ask a question. There is no ridiculous question, because the stuff is pretty complicated. But the next one is PT141. And this is an interesting one, because it actually works on men and women the same. It is known to stimulate arousal in the brain, and then actually help with vasodilation in the genital area, bringing blood flow there. So it can help with erections. It can help with, moving toward orgasm. It does all of that. And so for those who are not interested in the pill, taking the Viagras or the whatevers, this is a more natural way, I would call it, to, experiment with something like this, if this is an area that you've been struggling with. So I'll leave it at that, but any questions, always happy to answer. And no, I have not tried this one myself. I would need a boyfriend to do that, or a husband. I don't have a husband, so we're far away from that. So no, this is not one that I have tried, but I have heard that it's effective. So we'll leave it at that. Energy management. This might be one that everybody's interested in. I don't know. So energy management, if we think about this, there's a lot of ways to think about energy, and energy feels like, hey, I don't get tired at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or, I'm out for an 11-mile hike and I feel great. I'm not losing energy. But it also is how your body is functioning. So it's making sure your heart and your circulatory system and your musculoskeletal system, all of those, different parts of your body are functioning effectively and working together. So sometimes that's what energy management means. And especially so in the case of like the SS31s and the epitalons that are there to extend your telomeres or to help clean up your mitochondria. Those are working internally. And I will say, well, I'll wait till I talk about supplements, but I will say I've been on a mitochondria product for 11 years. And somebody asked me today, as a matter of fact, well, how do you know it's working? And again, there are diagnostic tests coming for some of this, but some of it is also just, believing in the science that you're hearing, believing in your longevity doctor who's done research, done studies and worked with clients in these areas, and believing in it, and desiring to be as healthy as you can and try what seems to make sense to you. So no judgments on any of that. Again, some of this is feeling a little bit futuristic, but science is moving every single day. I think we all know that. And so when I first, at the very beginning of this presentation, mentioned, the GLP-1s and what the American Medical Association had said about the GLP-1s having an impact on obesity, I did that mainly because what we're seeing is that just the success that we've seen with the GLP-1s on the health of American women is opening the door for the rest of these peptides. And so I think people are starting to realize, like, this idea of using your own existing hormones and proteins that are in your body and enzymes to repair and regenerate is a positive thing. And that looks like the way forward in terms of where medicine is going. So let me kind of finish with this, because I know I'm kind of all over the board, but I get excited about it because there is a lot of potential. And if any of you, again, live in bigger cities right now, there's a lot of longevity clinics popping up. I did some research, some work last year, consulting for a company called Humanot out of Austin, Texas, that just launched. And all of these longevity clinics are kind of all over the peptide therapy scene. So if you have not heard a lot about this, you will, I promise, continue to hear more. So I will look less like this, freaky person who's talking about all these super scientific terms in about a year. They'll be like, I know why she was doing this. So finishing on with energy management, back to tesamorelin again, and the hormone growth secretagogues. Anything that is secreting more growth hormone in your body is going to give you more energy. It's going to make your body more youthful in all senses. And so tesamorelin definitely leaves you with a greater sense of energy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, because we kind of already talked about SS31 and epitalon impacting more of like your internal, your mitochondria and your DNA strands, methylene blue on the right side is another one known for endurance. So it's impacting not just energy, but also mental clarity. And it's also been thought to possibly be able to reduce the amyloid plaques that develop that can contribute to Alzheimer's. So all of these are kind of in the energy management camp in terms of, brain health and energy management, body, and then, as I mentioned with tesamorelin, kind of overall energy.
So we do have a question. So Nora has a question in the chat.
Sure. Yeah.
She's asking, what is the difference between peptide supplementation versus hormone treatment? Is it one or the other? Or have you seen using these together is useful?
Definitely using them together. I actually, I'm going to save that because I am talking about hormones in a minute because I'm a big fan of hormone replacement therapy. So let me put that on hold until I just finish this slide. I think it's almost right after this, if that's okay. Just to finish cognitive enhancement, I'm going to just breeze through this. Selenk and Semax are the big two here. Selenk is known for anxiety reduction primarily, but can also help with memory and focus and with mood. So that is an intranasal mostly. It can be used as an injectable. Most people are using that as an intranasal spray. And then Semax in the middle is more for, again, focus and concentration. And that can be also an intranasal, but also can be an injectable. So both of those are, just another option on the radar screen of peptides for cognitive enhancement. And then the methylene blue, which we talked about on the previous slide with energy, also has some mental clarity and focus functions to it. So it feels like there's a lot of overlap here sometimes, and that's true. And some of this is because our bodies are all different. There is a little bit of a trial and error at times. Like some people respond better to Selenk in terms of anxiety reduction. Some people actually get anxiety reduction taking growth hormone, believe it or not. So it's a little bit of that trial and error as you start to go down this path. If you decide to, I can certainly give you background and feedback on what I've seen, what I've experienced with people or with myself. But, there is always a little tiny bit of like, how will this impact me? And so I'm going to, actually, it's right here. I'm going to talk a little bit about other supplements that are that have a lot of science behind them for women 45 plus. And I'll go to the bottom first because Nora asked the question. So HRT is sort of first and foremost what I call the first line of defense. So if you go back to that very first slide when we talked about the impact of estrogen loss, what we are learning now over and over again is, first of all, there was a very botched study done in the 90s that unfortunately did not have a representative sample of women. And the outcome of that was this idea that, that HRT was causing heart attacks, it was causing cancer. And they've since reversed that. And, some doctors still have not heard that. They have not heard about the reversal, the fact that the study was incorrectly done. And so what I think you are finding, if you talk to, the premier doctors in, better aging for women. So a couple of days ago, I was on a webinar and I asked some questions of Dr. Helen Messier, who is the chief medical officer of Fountain Life, which is Tony Robbins' longevity company. There's a lot in there, sorry. But I asked her about HRT because I've been on it personally for 7 or 8 years. And there's a lot of indications still to this day. Again, another one of those things that what you'll hear is, oh, women over the age of 60 shouldn't be on HRT. Helen's response, which I totally get, was, hormones have been in our bodies since birth, believe it or not. They are meant to be there. And her feeling is by maintaining a certain level of hormone in your body, you are maintaining a level of youthfulness. So she's a big proponent of being on HRT for the rest of your life, frankly. But again, let me caveat that to say that's an individual decision. And it also requires a look into your medical background and your family history, because there's certain contraindications with certain types of breast cancers, not all breast cancer, but there's things to look at. So I would say, Nora, that's, first of all, the first thing I would do if somebody comes to me. Matter of fact, I had this happen 2 weeks ago. I had a woman who is phenomenally fit woman. She runs a health club in New York City, and she wanted to get on peptides, and she wanted to, her energy level was low. She wanted to lose some body fat, but she was not on hormone replacement. And I said to her, before I would even think about putting you on peptide therapy, I want you to think about hormone replacements. So she is now on estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone and feeling fantastic. because it's great for energy, fat loss, brain, cognitive function. So I would do HRT first. And then, yes, you absolutely can ladder in peptides for what you're trying to achieve. But I would suggest certainly doing one at a time because, and I said this to her, you want to know what that HRT is doing to you first, what you can solve with that before layering in something for body composition or cognitive or whatever. So I don't know, does that answer your question? Hopefully.
Hi. Yeah, I'll just pop on. Yes, I've been on it for a couple of years and I think it's a total game changer. So,
Yeah.
I mean, but definitely have someone I have confidence in, and she's doing, continuous testing to make sure that the levels are, where they're recommended. And I mean, she saved my life in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can
So
absolutely layer the peptides on top for
Great.
sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And I see there's other questions, Trace, if in the chat. I don't know if I'm missing anything there. Just let me know.
Catherine had made a comment about the Women's Health Initiative.
Mhm.
And she's stating, as I share with so many women, best to stay away from referencing anything from that study since it was
Yeah.
so messed up in so many ways.
Thank you.
Look at the
Yes.
details. It is a science research nightmare.
Totally. Thanks, Catherine. So just to continue here, because I don't want to keep everybody all night and I can talk, I know that. So creatine is another one I'm sure many of you have heard, and if you have not, there's amazing things coming out with regard to creatine for all people, not just women, but specifically for postmenopausal women. It's got really two massive benefits. One is just muscle retention and the ability to grow muscle. So there's that, and that's always kind of been on the radar screen. But the other thing they found more recently is it's having significant cognitive benefits. So again, with ability to focus and with memory, which is huge. So creatine is a no-brainer, no pun intended there, but it's kind of one of my go-tos. I do that every morning, between 3 to 5 grams per day. And it does not matter if I'm working out or not working out. It should be a go-to for you as far as brain power. Second on the list would be nitric oxide enhancers. These are also showing up in longevity books as another boost. Again, I keep punning things, I'm sorry. But basically what they do is they are called vasodilators. They open up your veins and arteries and allow blood to flow through more efficiently. So they are fantastic for performance, for exercise performance. So it's out for that reason. I wouldn't necessarily think you need to take it every day, but if you're doing a big race, you're working, you got a big workout. I find them very, very helpful for that. Fish oil, another no-brainer, should be an absolute for anybody every day, 2 to 3 grams, not 200, micrograms. This is about getting 2 to 3 grams of fish oil. Hopefully, what am I trying to say? Preferably animal-based, fish-based, as opposed to plant-based, because again, they're much more available for your body to use. So that's the EPA and DHA, not the ALA. So let me say that again, DHA and EPA is what you want for fish oil. So that's another absolute. It's anti-inflammatory, and it is certainly a brain health advantage. Nicotinamide riboside and NMN. So if you remember me talking about NAD plus being, I didn't mention this, but it's a large molecule. It is hard to pass through membranes. What they're finding is nicotinamide riboside, NR, or NMN, which is nicotinamide mononucleotide. Both of those are building blocks of NAD plus and are seen to be as more effective at actually helping raise your NAD plus levels. So I don't even know how this happened, but 11 years ago, I started taking nicotinamide riboside, and I've been on it ever since. And I tell everybody, and more research is coming out on this, that, again, to keep your NAD plus levels up, these are easy fixes because you don't have to inject it. It's just a simple capsule. You take it once a day, and it is helpful in raising NAD levels as based on science. That's not just anecdotal stuff. So I'm a big believer in that. And then ashwagandha has specific clinical science for menopausal women for anti-anxiety. And it's been, believe it or not, as effective as anti-anxiolytic medications. Another big one. So I take that myself. I don't always take it every day, but if I'm feeling stressed, I do find it makes a difference. 300 milligrams is kind of the dose on that. So those are kind of a few other, and I added those in just because I think as we're talking about overall better aging, these things definitely deserve a slot on that list along the peptides. I will not spend a lot of time on this. This is just lifestyle. And my only point to this is, if you are thinking about peptide therapy, just remember, an injection is not going to necessarily extend your life. Exercise is still the #1 prescribed drug for aging. It really is. It's got, amazingly long-term benefits in terms of your health, in terms of how you age. I think we probably all know that, but you sometimes need to remind yourself when you don't want to go out and go for the long run or go hike or go to the gym. So that in and of itself goes a long way toward better aging. So how do you get started really quickly? You can, if you decide you want to go this path, we as in me, as in B-untethered, we actually are partnered with a physicians network. We cover all 50 states and with compounding pharmacies that are FDA regulated. And I emphasize that because I know I got a text today from somebody. There are constant, articles in the media about compounding pharmacies putting out bad quality product. And that is true. There probably are some, but we actually only work with those that are FDA regulated. So, all of the product is safe. We want to make sure of that. And the physicians are very knowledgeable about peptide therapy in general. So if it's of your interest, there's a lot of ways we can go. But basically, now we've got a medical questionnaire, we've got a diagnostics. If you decide you want to go that path and look at certain biomarkers, that's kind of becoming the trend. And then have a consult with a physician once you understand, once we understand what your medical background is and what your goals are, and figure out, is this the right fit for you and what specifically works for what you're looking to do. And then, just kind of move forward. So I think my main point to this is my website, Peptides. It's the simplest place to go. Sorry for the picture, but that's probably the easiest thing is just go there or call me. It's probably the best thing to do is just call me if you really want to go down this path and you want some insights on it. Other than that, that's kind of what I had for the day. So what kind of questions do you guys have, if any? That was a lot, and I am sorry because I know it was a lot, but we did record it. So if by any chance you want to go back through it or there's anything in particular you've got questions on, you can always call me, email me, text me.
Anissa?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I do have a question. You spoke about energy a lot. When you say that, it triggers my memories of caffeine, which I don't tolerate very well. It makes my heart race and gives me the jitters and I can't sleep. And I'm wondering if the peptides that focus on energy do the same, or does your body metabolize them differently?
So it's a good question. My experience with them is, and you can read all this online. They don't have that effect. They do not have, like, as caffeine is sort of an external force or an external ingredient coming into your body, the peptides are in your body. And so you just feel a heightened level of energy. It's hard to explain, but you just feel a more even keel sort of baseline level of energy that doesn't seem to go up and down like certainly it does with caffeine. As caffeine sort of falls off, you're tired. Same thing with sugar, right? Sugar's another one that kind of gives you the boost and then you crash. Peptide therapy, you kind of have this ongoing sort of stable level of energy as long as you're taking it. some of these last a little bit longer. So there's certain peptides. One I didn't talk about, which is something called GHK copper, which is for skincare, believe it or not. It's a great sort of plumper, firmer kind of skincare product, both as a cream or as an injectable. And that's one that stays in your system longer. So, you could go off of it and still feel the effects like 6 months later. Whereas most of these, 2 to 3 months, you're gonna stop feeling the benefits of them if you go off of them.
So are you going to have to take them for the rest of your life?
If you want to have those effects, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Anybody else? Was it helpful at all? Is it too much information? It was a lot, I know.
And Anissa, I've got a question for you. It's Nora. Hi.
Yeah, hi.
So have you had folks that have been on the GLP-1 and then they've moved to peptides? Or is it a thing where that's part of what I'm kind of interested in? So I've been on GLP-1 and on a really low dose of it now.
Mhm.
And it's been super helpful and it worked for me. So but I'm also like, I don't know that I want to keep doing this forever. So it's
Mhm.
like that fat girl in me is scared coming back. Not to
So
be weird about it. But anyway, what have you found? Or have you?
Is your question like, well, I guess what is, I'm sorry, I'm not really tracking 100% of your question.
So can you go off of the GLP and go to peptides, I guess? Or is it a matter of seeing what the blood work comes back and what's really needed, I
No,
guess?
you don't need to. I mean, you can make a decision you want to try a peptide. I
Yeah.
didn't say this, but all peptides do require a prescription, so you absolutely have to go
Okay.
through a physician.
Yeah.
And I think it would be dependent on what your goals are, which peptide would make sense for you. I mean, there's absolutely some that are fantastic for body composition, fat metabolism. So that's maybe a next logical step for you would
Okay.
be to, reduce or eliminate the GLP-1 and then move to something that's more body composition focused. And you can make that decision tomorrow to do that.
Okay, great. I'll follow up with you on
Okay.
how the testing works. Great. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yep. Anybody else? All right. Well, if no other questions, thank you guys so much for your patience. And we do have a recording, so just ping me if you want it by any chance you want to listen to that hour again. If you're like, I didn't get enough, Vanessa, please tell me more. Okay, well, thank you guys. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Bye.